With the search for Brian Laundrie coming to a close following the release of his final autopsy, the FBI is now being exposed for not doing their job. Within the details of that autopsy, we learned that Brian had taken his own life, which means that the whole time he was running from authorities, he was possibly armed. Now the FBI is being grilled over why they didn't notify the public that Brian Laundrie was possibly carrying a weapon. Law enforcement and the internet was on the lookout for any sighting of Brian following the death of his fiancée Gabby Petito. Her remains had been discovered in Wyoming, where the couple had visited during a road trip. However, when Brian returned home alone and in Gabby's van, people began to be suspicious that he was involved in her disappearance. Suddenly, the media was all over Brian's family home and the FBI was brought on to locate him. A forensic anthropologist determined that his cause of death was head injuries caused by a bullet. Attorney Steve Bertolino, who had represented the Laundrie family, was the first to notify them of this and later said to the press, "Chris and Roberta are still mourning the loss of their son and are hopeful that these findings bring closure to both families." And it may bring closure to both families, but it has certainly not made the public feel any safer. The big question on a lot of people's minds is that if Brian did take his own life, well then where is the weapon? Throughout this entire manhunt where local police were involved, the FBI was involved, even Dog the bounty hunter found a way in, yet throughout all of this, there was never any indication that Brian could be armed. Now you could argue that maybe all of these law enforcement agencies just didn't know that he was armed, and so how could they possibly have told the public this? Well, it turns out that they did know. The Laundrie family lawyer spoke with the press and said that one of the family's weapons was missing when Brian disappeared. However, investigators decided to knowingly keep this from the public to avoid anyone panicking. The attorney could not confirm what the make and model of the weapon was, but did say that the family knew it was a pistol. Bertolino goes on to say, "I don't know if law enforcement would mention that at the beginning. They found a body, they found possessions, that was it." When Brian left his parents' home, he told them that he was headed to the Carlton Reserve, but his remains ended up being found just less than 20 miles east of the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park. Police discovered Brian's remains underwater, so because it's unclear how long his remains were submerged, doing the autopsy became a huge issue. On top of that though, now that we know a weapon was involved, many believe that it could still be somewhere in that park. It could also be submerged, but it could also not be. If the FBI really cared about public safety, they would be looking for this missing weapon. Program coordinator of the Forensic Studies and Justice Program at the University of South Florida, Peter Massey, said that if Brian took his own life like the autopsy had revealed, and they don't have a firearm at that scene, then they have a big issue on their hands, adding that they need to account for this weapon, because then they could have a whole host of other issues to deal with. I don't even know if they can officially close this case until that missing piece is found. One thing's for sure though, the general public right now does not feel very safe knowing that the FBI kept this important piece of information hidden from them. Twitter is also in an uproar over this, and many believe that Brian could actually still be alive. To make this situation even stranger though, the attorney for Gabby Petito's family released a statement after being told about Brian's autopsy. However, in the statement they say something about additional individuals being charged. In the statement, their attorney Richard B. Stafford says, "The Schmidt and Petito family has been aware of the circumstances surrounding the death of the sole suspect in Gabby's death. Gabby's family will not be making a statement at this time due to the request of the United States Attorney's Office and the Teton County Prosecutor's Office. The family was asked to not make any comments and let the FBI continue their investigation. The family was also asked to wait for the United States Attorney's Office to make a determination on whether any additional individuals will be charged. When that determination is made, we will have a statement. And we will be patiently waiting for that statement." The case of Gabby Petito and the hunt for Brian Laundrie has truly come to an end. Recently, Brian's final autopsy was revealed, and needless to say, his final moments were not great. Brian was the lone suspect in the disappearance of his fiancée Gabby Petito. After she was reported missing, Brian went on the run, which led to a very long manhunt led by the FBI and flanked by reality TV star Dog the Bounty Hunter. Now, the final autopsy has revealed that he took his own life. A forensic anthropologist determined that his cause of death was head injuries caused by a bullet. Attorney Steve Bertolino, who had represented the Laundrie family, was the first to notify them of this and then later said to the press, "Chris and Roberta are still mourning the loss of their son and are hopeful that these findings bring closure to both families." The hunt for 23-year-old Brian Laundrie stretched on for weeks upon weeks, and in the search, many people were even wrongly accused of being Brian Laundrie. It was clear that all of America was on extra high alert for this wanted fugitive. However, when authorities started to find trash that he had left behind and then his father locating his backpack, they knew that they were getting closer. Police then located Brian's skeletal remains at the 25,000-acre Carlton Reserve, which was the last place that he told his family he was going. According to authorities, his remains were found submerged in the marshy park for weeks before they were found, which certainly created a big challenge for coroners to determine the cause of death. The pair had been traveling together on a cross cross-country road trip, with Gabby being an aspiring van life YouTuber. However, when Gabby went missing and Brian returned home without her on September 1st, Gabby's mother would report her missing 10 days later. Then on September 19th, authorities located Gabby's remains at a Wyoming campground. As I mentioned earlier, this then led to a massive FBI-led manhunt, but because Brian was simply under suspicion, the police needed something else that they could take action on. Eventually, they nailed him for using Gabby Petito's bank cards when he decided to run back to Florida. This allowed the FBI to enter the Laundrie family home and seize whatever evidence they required for their investigation. Ultimately, though, finding Brian's remains came down to having his father help the FBI track down where he ended up. Now, although the previous autopsy results were inconclusive, the forensic anthropologist has determined that Brian did take his own life.
A new update in the case of Brian Laundrie speculates that Brian could have been deceased just 2 days after Gabby was reported missing. A spokesperson in the Gabby Petito case has just claimed that there is a quote very good possibility that Brian Laundrie died 2 days after Gabby was reported missing. For a refresher, Gabby was reported missing on September 10th, 10 days after Brian came home from their trip without her. Brian's remains were just found and were skeletal by the time the police found them. Because of their condition, it's estimated the remains were at this location for close to a month. After this new timeline was developed, law enforcement have now determined that officers had mistaken a sighting of his mother for Brian a matter of days after Gabby was reported missing. The officer said this confusion likely did not change anything, it just gave the police a lead and made them believe he was still alive at that date. Although law enforcement now believes that Brian was already deceased when they made this sighting that turned out to be his mother Roberta. Northport Police spokesperson Josh Taylor told People, quote, "He still needed to be found. We just wanted people to better understand why we thought we knew Brian was in his home." Roberta Laundrie was spotted driving her son's silver Mustang while wearing a baseball cap, which officers believed was Brian at that time. Apparently Brian and his mother have a similar build, and the circumstances led them to believe it was Brian in the car. Now we know the last time Brian was seen would have been September 12th, when Brian left his family home very upset. Despite police officer Todd Garrison telling reporters at a press conference on September 16th that he knew exactly where Brian was located, the Northport police spokesperson is now saying he was likely already dead when that was said, based on this new information. The police chief also said that the Laundrie family's refusal to cooperate with investigators added to this confusion, as that could have been cleared up if Roberta shared her movements with police at the time. He added, quote, "Now to be clear, none of this may have made a difference with respect to Brian's life, but it certainly would have prevented all of the false accusations leveled by so many against Chris and Roberta with respect to hiding Brian or otherwise financing an escape." Brian's remains were found last week, with the FBI confirming that they belonged to him after checking dental records. The remains were found shortly after Brian's parents went searching in a specific area of the park where they knew Brian liked to hike.
As many of you know already, the remains that were discovered in the Carlton Reserve were identified as being Brian Laundrie, although there are still many questions that remain unanswered, and Brian's notebook that was found may clear some of that up. On Thursday, the FBI confirmed that the remains found in the Carlton Reserve belonged to Brian Laundrie, who had gone missing after his fiancée Gabby Petito was reported missing by her parents. As you know, Gabby's remains were discovered in a Wyoming National Park on September 19th, and so the search for Brian turned into a manhunt as he was labeled as a person of interest in that case. When Brian's remains were found by authorities, they also discovered a notebook, and according to some experts, they believe that the notebook could offer some insights into this story that has captured the public's attention. Former FBI profiler Jim Clemente said, "If that notebook contained, for example, information that could have been admissions, it could be projecting blame or rationalization. All that information could help the determination." Another source told the press that the notebook was clearly wet when it was found outside during their search, but that it is possibly salvageable. Marco Mara, a criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor, told CNN that the FBI will definitely have some luck recovering the notebook because of advancements in forensic technology, adding, "So I think there's going to be great information to come from that, because even if there is bleeding amongst the ink and the pages, they have done a great job with even much older items that they find." And according to the Laundrie family lawyer Stephen Bertolino, he said that the family does not know what is in the notebook, and that Brian's father picked up the bag that was found containing the notebook and immediately handed it over to law enforcement. Now we have to talk about this alleged letter that was said to have been found in Brian's notebook. The letter shared online reads, "I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for everything that has happened. I never intended for any of this. Gabby and I were truly in love, and I would give anything for her to still be here. I know that no one will understand that things simply got out of control. The strain of our relationship was more than I could bear. I should have known to stay home after what happened in Moab. Everything was already a disaster at that point, but something made me return. Once Gabby was gone forever, I realized that I was too. When we went camping at Fort DeSoto, I wanted to tell you what really happened, but I couldn't bring myself to. Please forgive me for all that has happened happened and all that I have put everyone through. I was too ashamed to tell Gabby's family what happened to her. I was too ashamed to tell anyone. I hope someday people can understand what really happened. Until we meet again someday, I love you forever." Now right away I was a bit skeptical about this note just freely being pushed around on the internet. If they discovered a notebook that had been outside for anything over 24 hours, there's a slim chance that it would be in such good condition. Now I know the FBI said that they could salvage it, but this one was a little too perfect. And according to the Sun newspaper, they are claiming that the letter was faked by internet trolls. Tom Joyce, a retired lieutenant commander with the NYPD, also said that it was strange for Chris Laundrie to have discovered the bag belonging to his son while he was out of view from investigators. The discovery came less than 90 minutes after Chris and his wife Roberta arrived at the park and was found near the site where their son's skeletal remains were later found. On top of that, police had been searching that park for over a month and couldn't find anything. However, in less than 2 hours, with the help of Brian's parents, they miraculously found everything that they were looking for. The Laundrie family lawyer attempted to dismiss claims of the parents planting evidence and said, "Chris didn't want to pick the bag up because he wanted law enforcement to see it. This was caught on camera. Chris couldn't find the law enforcement because they were then out of sight, because Chris had been in the woods, so he didn't want to leave the bag there with the news reporter standing nearby, so he picked it up." In addition to all of this, Bertolino said that Brian's parents will not be laying their son to rest with a traditional funeral. Apparently, what's left of his body will be incinerated and held onto privately by his family. However, the ashes will also be given to the Laundrie family once authorities have finished examining his remains, with hopes of discovering the cause of his death. As for them skipping the funeral, this is most likely to avoid a protest. If they've had people showing up outside of the family home during the search for Brian, you can definitely bet that some people would show up to the funeral.